This lesson is on slope-intercept form and how to use slope-intercept form to graph lines. So the first thing we need to talk about is what slope-intercept form is. And it looks like this. It's when the y is all by itself on the one side of the equal sign. And then you have an m, an x, and a b. Now the m and the b are going to end up being numbers. So it might look like this. So y equals 2x plus 3. And what's important for you to know is that the number directly in front of the x is always going to be the m, or the slope. And the number that's either added or subtracted, the plain constant number, is always going to be your b, or what that stands for is your y-intercept. So remember that intercepts are where your line crosses the x or y axis. So a y-intercept, if I look at a coordinate plane, the y-intercept would be when my line crosses that y-axis. So first we're just going to get some practice picking out the m and the b, the slope and the y-intercept. So in A, if I have y equals negative 2x plus 4, the number in front of x is always your slope. So here's your m. And the plain constant number is always your b. So you would have a positive 4 for your b. In example B, I have y equals 2 plus 4x. So they tried to trick you a little bit here because they switched the b and the m. But if I look for the x, the number that's right in front of it is my m, or my slope. And the plain constant is my b, or my y-intercept. In our third example, we have y equals 2 minus x. So the number in front of x is my slope. And we have to be careful here. We have to remember that this is a negative 1x. So negative 1 is my m, and this positive 2 in front of it is my b. Now once I find my m and my b, I can use those to help me graph without using all those tables. So if we take a look at our first example in blue, we have y equals 1/2 x minus 2. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to pull out what the m and the b are. So starting with my m, remember m is always that number in front of x. So it ends up being 1 over 2. This is rise over run. And my b is, in this case, a negative 2. So I use the m and the b. I use a little shortcut to kind of help me remember. So the b, I always think of it standing for beginning. So begin here at a y-intercept of negative 2. So I'm going to go right on the y-axis, right to negative 2, and I'm going to put a dot. And what this tells me is regardless of what my line looks like, it will definitely go through this point right there. So B stands for begin here. The M, I always think of it standing for move this way. So remember that your M, your slope in a graph, is your rise over your run. So in this case, I have a rise of 1. So from my point, I'm going to go up 1. And I have a run of 2. I'm going to run 2 in the positive direction. And I'm going to put a second point. Now at this point, I only need 2 little dots to make my line, but I could continue my pattern. So if I go rise 1, run 2, put another little dot. I also can take my pattern and go backwards. So if I switch both of my signs, keeping in mind that 1/2 is the same thing as a negative 1 over negative 2, I could rise negative 1 and run negative 2. And notice how it still falls in that nice straight pattern. And then the best you can, you want to make sure that you go ahead and draw a nice straight line, go all the way through your graph, and then don't forget your arrows at the end. Okay, let's try a red one. So I have this time y equals 2x plus 1, so I'm going to start the same way. I'm going to pull out the m and the b. So my m in this case is 2, and my b is 1. So remember, the b stands for begin here. So I'm going to begin on the y-axis right at 1. And this time when I look at my slope, I have a 2, but I need a rise over a run. So I'm going to take this 2 and make it a fraction by putting it over 1. So now my rise is 2, and my run is 1. So from that point, I'm going to rise 2 and run 1. And there's my point. And I can keep doing this a couple more times if I want. It's really up to you. And again, the best you can, go ahead and draw a straight line through those points all the way across your graph. And don't forget your arrows at the end. sometimes we end up with an equation that's missing some pieces. So in this case, if I have y equals 3/4 x, if you think about it, I normally have y equals mx and I have a plus b, and I'm missing that piece here. So I got to add it in. So I got to think of a number that I can add that isn't going to change the value. And so hopefully you're thinking, oh, I can add 0, so plus 0. So what that means is my m in this case is 3/4, and my b is 0. So I'm going to begin at 0, which means I'm starting right at the origin, and I'm going to move 3/4. So I'm going to move, I have a rise of 3, so 1, 2, 3, and a run of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And there's my points. Remember, I could go up again and over. I could go backwards. I could go down 3 and back 4. And notice my line will still, or my points will still fall in that nice straight line. So draw your line, add your arrows. Now all of our examples so far have worked out pretty nice because they already are in slope-intercept form. They look like y equals mx plus b. But that's not always going to be the case. And so what happens if I have an equation that looks like this, where I have 4x plus 5y equals 15? So you can see right away it's not in that slope-intercept form. So our very first step is going to be just to try to get that y by itself. Okay, so I'm going to start with a line down the middle so I can see the left and right side. So if I want to get this y by itself, I first need to move the 4x. So opposite operations say I should subtract. So I'm left with 5y is equal to negative 4x plus 15. And then my last step, I need to divide all three terms by 5. So I end up with y is equal to, and don't worry if you get a fraction, because remember, for slope, I need a fraction. I need a rise and a run, so it's better if I get a fraction there. Okay, so here's my first step. Now it looks like y equals mx plus b. It's in that correct slope-intercept form. So now I'm going to pull out my m. So the number in front of x is negative 4/5. I'm going to pull out my b. My y-intercept is 3. And so remember, I'm going to begin here. So right at 3 on my y-axis. And I'm going to move this way. I'm going to rise negative 4. So I'm actually going to go down 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to run 5 in the positive direction. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And there's my dot. And again, you could do more if you want. You only really need those 2 dots to draw a straight line. So draw your line and add your arrows. Now it's your turn, so find some practice problems and see how it goes.